Hi, everyone. Good to see everybody here. We are going to talk about the changing landscape of watchmaking, and I'm just going to give you a small introduction into what I think is important going into the questions for my panelists here. So, since the pandemic, watchmaking has experienced changes like almost never before in such a short amount of time. Are these changes here to stay? Are they heralding more challenges? Or is it just part of the historic watchmaking curve? That's the topic we're going to talk about and explore today. So I'd like to introduce Andrea Furlan, co-founder and lead designer of Furlan Marri from Switzerland. Manuel Emch, who is the member of board of directors at Louis Erard and co-founder of Colloquium. And Scott Wempe, limited partner at Wempe and the fourth generation of the Wempe dynasty. So,
dynasty.
I would call it a dynasty.
You're killing me.
No. So these extreme changes now visible in the watch industry certainly began during the pandemic. They've visibly affected three main areas that I've identified and that might interest the customer: the pre-owned market, brand offerings, and retail, how we buy watches. We're not specifically here to talk about pre-owned watches. That would fill up an entire day by itself. Suffice it to say, I think the situation is closely tied to that of the smaller and independent brands at this time. When the watch industry experienced a sudden surge right during the beginning of the pandemic, because many people with lots of disposable income had nowhere to spend it. So this sparked extreme interest in both pre-owned and independent watches, which were both fairly readily available on the internet. So both Furlan Marri and Louis Erard benefited from this situation, I would say. Furlan Marri was established in 2019?
2021.
Okay, but 2021 was the first watch coming out, correct?
Yeah, the Kickstarter, yeah.
Exactly, so with Kickstarter. And Manuel became involved with Louis Erard also around the same time, with the first watches coming out in 2020, 2021, under his leadership and direction, including iconic designs with an iconic designer, Alain Silberstein, which is personally near and dear to my heart. These two brands are great examples of this changed landscape. So, Andrea, I wanted to ask you, what do you attribute this almost instant success of your brand to?
Yeah. So we started a Kickstarter in 2021, and the things that we had a real preparation before the Kickstarter, it was really a huge preparation.
Yeah.
We could see that, certainly the Kickstarter and the COVID situation had an impact on Kickstarter. It was the time that people had a lot of time to discover new brands. To learn about that, and we certainly it was benefits for us. When we started a Kickstarter, it's a system of pre-order. So what's really good when you begin a brand like us, actually we had no choice financially speaking. We begin the Kickstarter with almost zero budget marketing. It was zero, and the pre-order process of Kickstarter helped us to not overstock our produce, and actually it was great for us because we end up with 2,000 customers already after 30 days. So it gave us a database of customers, and thanks to that we had the chance to build a customer database and take care about the customer after.
Yeah. Yeah, and yours was similar. It's also online retail. How do you see Louis Erard continuing to capitalize on this extreme success today, 3-4 years into it?
That's a challenging question, but I think just by continuing being creative, daring to push boundaries, I think this is what we're trying to do. We started, as you said, with Alain Silberstein, which was our first watchmaker collaboration, and actually a funny story. We initiated this collaboration because we had no other choice. Not that we didn't want to choose anybody else, but back in the years, I think it was 2019, when I joined Louis Erard to basically reassess the strategy. The company was, let's say, in pretty bad shape, not to say anything else. And the number one client back in the year was Japan. Okay? The Japanese distributor back then was probably around 40% of the business. And I met with them, and I understood after about 2 or 3 minutes of the meeting that they wanted to stop. Okay, so I understood that if they stop, I'm done. Okay, so I had to pull out some joker card, and Alain, as you know, is very famous in Japan, and I had this idea of doing collaborations for a long time, and then I just pulled that card. I bluffed to the Japanese, saying, "Look, you should not stop. We're soon going to have a collaboration with Alain Silberstein." They obviously were like, "Oh, wow, how is this possible?" It didn't fit at all into the brand strategy back then. And that was the first bluff. And the second bluff was the COVID loan, because we financed the entire strategy with the COVID loan from the Swiss government, because we had no money. So we get, back in the years, for those who know, you could request some COVID loan to support it, which we paid back, by the way, precise by in the meantime. And that helped us to really start that kind of strategy. And I think the strategy now is gaining momentum. Lots of people always tell me, you're going to get out of ideas. So far, I think we're pretty good.
And is that how you plan to keep the consumer attention focused on your brand?
Yeah.
Just by more craziness, I guess?
By pushing boundaries into more philosophical, more engaged. We started with watchmakers. Why? Because watchmakers, obviously, in the ecosystem of the watchmaking industry is known. Working with Alain Silberstein, Vianney Halter, Konstantin Chaikin, our names, Sergione may be a little bit less known, but are names that people feel attracted to. They're strong names, important names, but there's also a limitation. There's not that many very interesting watchmakers with a signature, and in order to push the concept further, we have to venture into other fields, and one of them being contemporary artists, which are obviously mostly also much more engaged, which have different messages, have different vision on things, architects or other people. So this is a concept that we can, over time, build into other domains or other collaborations.
I see. Okay. And overall, how important have these independent style companies become right now? Let's ask Andrea. What do you think? What is the importance of these types of companies in our landscape at the moment?
I think they bring freshness and innovation. They are also very close to their own audience and customer with the rise of social media, online presence, like you can see with Louis as well, complication and collaboration with different artists, collectors.
Yeah.
So I think, it's...
Yeah.
I would say probably the best to answer this question is
That's where I was going next.
dynasty here.
Microbrands and small creators are, in my estimation, more important now than they ever were. But you're part of a retail chain that deals with the biggest brands in our industry. How do you see this?
Look, I definitely think it's gaining a lot of importance and it's gaining a lot of momentum, right? That's for sure. You're pushing boundaries, you're doing things differently. And probably one of the most important things about that is this idea of pushing other brands to have to act differently as well, right? Because the industry has to react to what small brands are doing today, and I think that's happening. I wanted to come back to something you said, because you got, through Kickstarter, you got a lot of customer data early, which is super interesting, and obviously a massive resource that everybody's aware of, and everybody knows we have to get customer data and we have to work with it. But how people are working with it so far, I think, is probably not enough. But what it enables us to do is to be way more personal in the way we communicate watchmaking, in the way we speak to clients, in the way we engage as an industry and as a whole, right? And which collaborations are interesting, which sort of life worlds I want to dive into, how I can excite my customer again and again and again. And that's something that microbrands, through, again, engagement on social media, being very close to the customer in dialogue, we talked yesterday about sort of co-creation ideas, stuff like that. These are all principles that are originating, in part at least, in the microbrand and independent world, and they're sinking into the more established world as well, which is, I think, a great thing to happen. desperately
Actually, I
necessary.
think he's very right, and I think for Andrea it's the same. I'm personally in contact with a lot of my clients directly on WhatsApp or Instagram, whatever. I even created groups so I can, just get a bit quicker with the answering. But we're very close to our customers. We're very close, and I mean, that's one of the things that has really changed with the COVID. Being locked, the distance have been taken away through social media and the direct contacts. And I think this is something that maybe more traditional brands are just not structured yet, and they fear that kind of closeness to the clients.
Well, and look, maybe if I can just
No, go for it. Yeah.
jump into that. Traditional brands are looking for that, right? You have this massive expansion of direct retail that brands are looking into, which is obviously something we're dealing with as well, which is it's offering opportunities, it's offering challenges, it's normal. But it's direct engagement with the client, not only via social media, but in person, right? It's something we've done, again, as you said, for almost 150 years, and it's probably the thing we do best. And our challenge is to translate that into a digital world and to do this super personal interaction in the online world. But brands are trying to do that as well. They're trying to find the ways. They're just taking usually more established routes, such as physical retail.
Yesterday, Clio moderated a panel about Gen Zs, how to actually capture the Gen Z audience, and what came out of it was actually this personal authenticity, that they want to touch and feel watches and talk to the creators, which has always been the draw of the independent creators, I find.
Yep.
When you look back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you have a Vianney Halta or anybody from the HCI, that was the thing. You could go to your creator, commission a watch, and you had all this personal interaction which went into your passion for the item. And it was no longer an item, it was part of you, right? So you feel that today too, right? But on a different scale, I imagine, because your production volume is different.
Yeah.
The way you create your watches is different. But at retail, it might be a little bit harder. Like a customer comes in, I want a microbrand, or I want a custom watch. What do you do?
So, first of all, and I think this is still true for Gen Z, for most customers in the industry, most people come into the industry via established brands. That's the experience we have, maybe because we're known for it, but that's the experience we have. Nonetheless, microbrands is growing and the interest is growing, and once people are engaged with the watchmaking culture, once you lead them there, which is why I think actually this is great, having a cultural focus here at this fair, and it should be bigger at various other fairs, because it educates and it allows people to actually know what they're looking for and why they want a Furlan Marri or why they want a colloquium. And what's special about it and why it's interesting, right? Currently, we can't serve that need. I'm working on it.
Gen Z. But this education thing, I mean, for example, Furlan Marri, if you ask me, that was one of the whole reasons it took off like it did. It capitalized on watchmaking history. And if you were familiar with history, you saw it like in the first second of looking at a picture of that watch. Did you purposely go that route? I'm sorry to go off book here, but did you look to history and say, this is awesome, we can actually connect with our customers through history?
Yeah. We don't have any history as a brand. We come up with, we built our brand digitally, so that's really, we have to find a way, and we focus on details, on historical details in our watches. We tell stories of a movement, we tell stories of a case maker, and we try to also change a little bit, twist with modern details, like we did with a Disco Volante. We told the story of Peseux, the movement, which is a really important story in the watch industry, and we twisted with some design for our own touch. But yeah, it's difficult for a young brand to when you don't have a history, you have to invent something, and then we can speak to the audience online as well. Sometimes people think we are a big brand with a lot of people, and because we are online, we can make this kind of image, but in fact we are 8 people, and so it's we just want to be really precise on what we we tell online. So we discuss with collectors, we discuss with many people in the watch industry, historical experts, Philips, Sotheby's, etc., to actually tell them what we do if it's really true to what we if it's true details of the past as well, and we really are really close to the collectors sphere. Yeah.
Yeah, but because they're educated, they understand your designs are rooted in watchmaking history. How do new collectors find their way into Louis Erard? Is it they see the fun, colorful designs, or do they make that connection?
Well, I think because we use pretty much the same logics than haute horlogerie. So basically what we're trying is to apply the fundamentals of haute horlogerie in a more accessible price point. And that goes from, let's say, rational things like working with high-end watchmakers, one thing, to much more abstract things like second markets, auctions, which are a fundamental part of our strategy as well. Scarcity. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do watches in a price point between, let's say, 2,000 and 5,000, except a few others, but we only produce 10 watches a day. That's it. And we could do eventually much more, but the interest for us is not the quantity, it's the quality. So that's the focus we have, basically building on these kind of elements, including craftsmanship, using guillochema, using full fire enamel, wood marquetry, hand engraving. So we're trying to really, to a certain extent, democratize the elements that make haute horlogerie abstract, but also concrete factors.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the strongest things about Louis Erard.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I've always loved. You can get a client who is maybe interested in watches, you can show them a wood marquetry piece, and it's amazing craftsmanship at an attainable price. And you can really then have an intro into haute horlogerie, and you can develop that knowledge and you can develop that interest. If you're like a retailer, a brand can do it as well, but that's how I understand my job as a retailer is to guide someone through their life in watch collecting and show them maybe what's right for them at any given time in their lives. And same with jewelry for that matter. But that's why I've always enjoyed what you do with that.
And I think this is also something we're trying to do. We're actually doing, we like to do the elevator, okay? Not just the elevator pitch, but the elevator thing, in the sense that we want younger people to be able to get into that elevator of collecting watchmaking. Yeah. To have something accessible, collectible. I'm a Swatch kid, and I've started collecting watches through Swatch because that was my price point back in the years. Inflation has changed it, so with Louis Erard we're not too far off nowadays. Anyway, but the idea is really that we can bring in, on one side, young customers, open them up to what is haute horlogerie, what is interesting in watchmaking, and the other way around is for people who collect very high-end pieces to have something for daily use, affordable, that you can walk around in some cities in Europe and other places as well without getting, mocked for it. So it's this idea that we really play on both fields, up and down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But that brings us again into the established brands, where Scott is our resident expert, kind of. Established brands are having a tough time right now after all this boom year success. And we had the tech bros and the flippers and all this, and we're coming out of that now, and we're going into a whole different cycle of the watchmaking world. What, in your opinion, does an established brand need to do to hold people's attention right now?
So first of all, some established brands are having a tough time. Yeah. Some others are having a pretty solid time. Right? Like, that's for sure.
I don't think you need to name them. They're pretty evident for everyone.
Yeah. But what those brands are doing right is consistency, exclusivity, of course, also, if you're at that level. I also like to speak about inclusivity. This is something like democratizing haute horlogerie. Mm-hmm. This is very important, but it's a different level, right? This idea of I want to attain something is definitely still there. I think there's a lot of brands who have to look inside themselves and actually see what the customer out there really wants, right? How he really wants to be spoken to, how he really wants to be engaged with. And that's not just by raising price points, for example, to make the watch more, to make the watch, make the collectors who've already bought pieces happy, and so on. Right? There's a couple of pieces out there that have doubled in price, and that's just too much over the past years. And I think there has to be a normalization. But this is something that's being realized for sure, which is great to see. And then, yeah, being more personal, being more direct as well, taking stances on certain things, being also more innovative sometimes, right? With the consistency at the core, right? You shouldn't just go, if you're an established brand, you shouldn't just go doing something totally different to the core of your brand values, just to be innovative, because then people get confused. But I think within your positioning, within where you are, within your identity, there is a lot of potential to do things differently and to communicate differently and so on. So, yeah. But I don't want
I think I pretty much agree with the thing. There's a consolidation process.
Yeah.
We all know it. The volume's going down year by year. Prices go up, but volumes still go down. But there's a consolidation to the best in class, like pretty much in everything in the world. So there's a best in class, and I think obviously Wempe represents most of them, if not all of them, best in class. But what's challenging is what comes next. In the past, there was a space for number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 on a kind of similar philosophy. But I think this is gone. There's maybe space for the leader, the follower, or the challenger. But then people are looking for different creations, innovations, ideas, concepts. They want to, because the watch also becomes more and more a kind of a, we're moving a little bit away from that consumer good logic into that kind of, let's call it artistic. And this is also when you said before, where the creator becomes central again. The creator used to be central for the independents, but today the creator or the person who represents or endorses the brand becomes also much more important again. People want to interact. And I think this is, I agree with Scott on this. Yes, it's challenging, but it's not challenging for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the product is key, and behind the products is the artisan and the creative, always.
Yeah.
And the product is what makes me proud to be able to represent these brands that have been there for decades and centuries, and have been creative for decades and centuries. And it's finding the core of that creativity again and adapting it to modern times and to modern customers that is going to make brands successful in the future. I'm convinced of that, and I think the independent brands are the ones who challenge these brands to do exactly that, and that's a super important role in the industry.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for example, right after the Kickstarter, we instead of having a lot of more collection and to make more design, make more affordable pieces, we completely changed it, and we wanted to do like kind of innovation. So we started to do a perpetual calendar, and we had with the small team we have, we just in 1 year we didn't do a lot of watches in 2022, but we started to create something and to challenge ourselves for also our community to show them that we can do something actually a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, you just launched something too, like yesterday.
It was it's a community design lab, so people can now. It's a new project we have to actually do what our community wants. So we will do a voting session with some design, some choice of colors, some choice of components. People will be able to vote, and we will actually co-create a watch with all the community. And we will. It's very good also for the data to know actually what our people want really, and also we will not overstock, overproduce, because we will do a pre-order, and people will be able to have also a special price like our Kickstarter. We will go back to our first things, and then they will be able to follow the creative process. We will share with them the results. We will share with them some insights, some costs as well, so they can be more engaged And I think it's an interesting project, and I can't wait to see what they will choose.
Yeah, excellent. I think we'll just hit one more topic, and then maybe go to questions. There's a lot of people here. Maybe there's questions for our panelists. But one thing that bothers me personally right now is the state of watch journalism. And there's a lot of panicked headlines, bloggers, YouTubers, Instagrammers, who are proclaiming the industry to be dead and dying. We are seasoned vets. We know that it's a correction, that the watch industry comes and goes in cycles. It's just the way it's always been. It's the way it will always be. But we just have gone through 3 or 4 boom years like we've never seen, to be honest. Yeah. Okay, crystal ball time. Where does it go from here?
I think it's super important to highlight that these have been massive boom years since COVID.
Yeah.
It's been crazy. Mm-hmm. And people have loved watches, and there's more people in the world that are dealing with the topic of watches probably than ever before, who are interested about watches, who are watching videos by new content creators, reading articles by new types of journalists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's great. We should keep that up. But there's going to be people who drop out. There's going to be, right? That's part of the standard process. But it is important to not just talk about the watch industry dying whilst also recognizing the difficulties. I think one of the most important things is what you mentioned, Manuel. Numbers, total numbers, are going down. This is reality. And you can't always keep that up just by raising prices. That's a massive issue, and as an industry, we have to come together to change that in the long run, to really find ways how we can raise numbers, get the pieces out there, get watches on people's wrists, because in the end, anybody wearing a watch is always going to be the best ambassador for the watch industry ever. There's no better ambassador than the customer.
And I think this is the big paradox that we are living right now. We have never had that many new customers, people interested in watches. Mm-hmm. There's a new generation coming that we haven't seen for 20 years. COVID brought that kind of new interest on the watchmaking. Today is a correction, but there's also structural issues. And one of the main structural issues is we're overcapacity, especially in the movement making, Swiss mechanical movements, but let's not even talk about the quartz movement. So we have that kind of paradox where the business is challenging, but we have plenty of new customers. So I think there's a match that hasn't been done, and there's I would say, a logical counter effect of the excessive, because we can't say anything else, of the excessive last years. And I think we have main issues that we need to address, and one of them being today what's important, I think somehow we notice that, is the product becomes the hero, not the brand, or not just the brand. It's not just about the marketing, it's what you value, what's the value proposition, different things, and they come back to the price. And it's also how to engage with the customers. I mean, a lot of brands have lived in ivory towers over the last few years. Yeah. And not just because they were disconnected because of COVID, it's just the mentality. And I think this is also things that have to change. So there's a lot of, I would say, the state of the industry, it's definitely not great, but there's a lot of huge potential coming, and there's a lot of new customers coming in, but we just need to change our mindset. So we just don't need to redesign new products, you also need to change a little bit the mindset.
Yeah. How do you see this, Andrea?
People, we were always surprised, like when we do events or when people come to the showroom, they are more and more educated about any type of brand, any type of micro brand. They know their models, the names, they know a lot of information, and it's thanks to the social media and the digital world, and it's great for the future.
Yeah.
May I just jump on one thing
Please.
that Manuel said, because I think it's super important, this idea of being overcapacity, especially in the movement making industry and so on. We're overcapacity also in the service industry, lead times are getting longer and so on and so forth, right? We have to work as an industry, as brands, as retailers, as individuals, not only in getting people interested in watchmaking in order to sell them our watches, We have to get them interested in watchmaking per se, in the job of watchmaking. We have to get people onto the workbench. We have to make it attractive to make movements, to make watches, to repair watches. And this is absolutely critical for the longevity of the watch industry that we so often love to talk about, because that's what makes the product special, right? It's going to be there in 40 years.
Right.
Someone has to repair it in 40 years. Someone has to make it in 40 years. This is essential. And I think, lastly, we spoke about this yesterday, Andrea, if there's any other independent brands and so on, from a retailer's perspective, this idea of service in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, is critical for any micro brand, any independent brand that's coming on the market right now, because those that will not develop the infrastructure within the brands, that service and longevity of the brand will be guaranteed, who invest in marketing instead of quality and service and longevity, those will be the micro brands to disappear, and they will be the micro brands who won't find a space in this retail environment that I, in the end, come from.
And I think both Andrea and I, we can agree on this. The pure direct-to-consumer model that brought us up.
Yeah.
We had distribution, but for Colloquium and for it was a pure direct-to-consumer concept to raise. But on the long term, we're very well aware that we need the partnerships, we need the retailers, we need the touch points, we need the service points, because that's what will make the brand sustainable over the longer period. Yeah. Because if you just do online, you come and go.
Yeah.
That's a reality.
Yeah, and that's a fear, I think, of a lot of consumers that are afraid to buy purely online for this exact reason. That's why retailers are so trusted. I mean, we all have our auto mechanic, our hairdresser, and our retail jeweler.
Yeah, it's our job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that security.
Yep.
This is why people come to us. That's why we're long-standing client relationships in the market.
Yep.
And it's also the reason why multi-brand is performing quite well in comparison to some mono-brand on the market at the moment.
Yeah.
Because it's just more established. If you can't open up a boutique and expect customers to stream in tomorrow. Doesn't work like that.
Well, I think our time is up. But that was a fantastic discussion. Thank all three of you for that. It was really, really good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.